Thank you for joining, everyone. My name is David McBride. I lead digital solutions and consulting at Course 5 Intelligence. Thank you for attending. Our webinar today is on the topic of data literacy, closing insights gaps in uncertain times, presented by Course 5 Intelligence and featuring Forrester analyst Jennifer Ballasant.
Thanks, David.
Course 5 Intelligence is focused on driving digital transformations enabled through analytics, insights, and artificial intelligence. We work with Fortune 500 companies and agencies in key regions like the US, EU, Middle East, and Asia Pacific. We've found that rapid advances in artificial intelligence and machine learning technology have enabled us to create disruptive technologies on behalf of our customers to help them better understand their customers through analytics and to act on those insights. A few housekeeping items as we get started. We are recording today's webinar and we'll be making it available via our website, www.course5i.com. We'll also be emailing all of our registered attendees and registrants a link. We encourage you to continue the conversation on Twitter using the hashtag Data Literacy Impact, and we also welcome your questions during this session. You'll find a Q&A button either at the bottom or the top of your screen. We have about 45 minutes today and encourage you to stay throughout. I'm excited to be joined today by Jennifer Ballasant from Forrester. As a principal analyst at Forrester, Jennifer helps customer insights professionals. Her research examines the tools and services that help organizations better use and share data. Jennifer's research and analysis has been widely published. Before entering the tech world, she focused on public policy reform, particularly in developing nations. She served as an educator in the Peace Corps, Central Africa, where, among other things, she developed national math curricula, taught high school math, and created exams at the national level as well. She earned a PhD and an MA in political science from Stanford and a BA in economics from the University of Virginia. We're excited to hear from her today. So, Jennifer, thanks for coming, and over to you. I'll stop sharing.
Thank you. Yep, I'll jump in here. Very excited to be here today and talking to you about data literacy. This is something that is a passion of mine. I'm very excited about it. Have been spending quite a lot of time talking to companies across the spectrum about how to really raise the bar in terms of their data literacy across the whole organization. And I'm really excited to share that with you today. So let's jump in. Everyone is talking about data today. We all know that, particularly now in this, this pandemic period. Not sure what we're all calling it, but we hear about new cases, active cases, serious cases. Things like death rates and flattening the curve, obviously. But not everyone knows what data means today. And in a recent study, we found that there was some confusion. So I often start a data literacy workshop with a little quiz. I offer a pop quiz, like you see here, and we go through different types of content. Is an EU consumer confidence survey data? Well, yes, it's data. It's collected through a survey of the EU population. But what about a John Oliver video on YouTube? Yes. As you can see on the right, we know some of the stats about it. We know when it was aired, how many times it was viewed, but we can also mine it mine the transcript and the images for more data. And really, you and I we all know here that everything on this list, from an Eminem song to a Forrester report to the weather, your latest Amazon order, all of that is data today. What we really need to keep in mind is that others in your organization might not recognize that. They might not recognize that everything is data. Of course, we all rely on data-powered services. These tools like Uber and Waze and Yelp, they make our lives easier. And they analyze data for us. Uber helps us find rides, and Waze helps us plan our routes to work. Yelp helps us find a place to eat, even in a city that we might not necessarily have been to. But just because we're all data literate doesn't mean that, digitally literate, doesn't mean that we're data literate. Digital literacy and data literacy are not the same things. Digital literacy refers to an individual's ability to find, evaluate, and compose clear information through writing or other media on various digital platforms. Data literacy at Forrester we define as the ability to recognize, evaluate, work with, communicate, and apply data and the insights derived from it in the context of your business priorities and outcomes. And while employees might live their lives on a smartphone or know how to navigate some of these new apps, that doesn't mean they're data literate. And so we did a survey of an online panel, and we found that some employees don't even recognize data, which is why we start that definition of data literacy with the ability to recognize data. But when we did this quick qualitative survey, we asked 3 questions. Do you work with data? Are you comfortable working with data? And what types of training would you like to improve your ability to work with data? And from a research perspective, we thought that the third question would be the most interesting, that last question about what kinds of training they wanted to see, because we were building research on data literacy. We were building a data literacy program. But it turns out that the first 2, which were supposed to be screeners, were really very fascinating. People didn't think they worked with data. We got answers like this. We don't really analyze data where I work. We don't calculate or do any aggregations of data. We'll create spreadsheets on various subjects, but that's more a way to track issues and keep a record. It isn't really data calculations. And we kind of took a step back there and we thought, wow, they don't recognize that this spreadsheet that they're working with, that they're tracking their issues with, they're tracking their projects with, that is data today. Data doesn't just mean numbers or calculations. So sometimes we need to explain that we have tools to analyze these kinds of things. So for example, we, as part of our data literacy workshops, we teach people who might not be as data savvy or analytics savvy, that text analytics can create spreadsheets from that data. Can create data from those spreadsheets. And often it helps to give a quick example. So here you see a Yelp review. And there are tools that pull data from Yelp reviews and provide insights into what those Yelp reviews mean. So they can extract what's unstructured data and turn it into more structured data to tell us things about the contents, what people are eating in particular restaurants, how people feel about particular restaurants. So they're analyzing the tone, the language, the different parts of speech, and telling us about the sentiment or the intent of those words. We can also do that for images and videos. We know that, but often other people that we work with in our organizations don't necessarily know that. So we can analyze things like crowds in an image or cars in an image or even cows that can be identified and analyzed. And we expect image and videos to increasingly be turned into data because 64% of our survey respondents tell us that they plan to purchase and use computer vision, that it's going to be an important tool for them in the coming year. And so even more so than in the past, everyone works with data. But not everyone knows that, and even when you don't think you do, you do. So, for example, a cashier. Let's take an example of a cashier. Ringing up a sale, even using the term ringing up a sale, that's not really, there's no ringing anymore. It's not like an old cash register. It doesn't look like this anymore. In fact, it looks more like this. No, I shouldn't be calling them a cash register. I should be calling them a point of sales system or a point of sales device. So it's no longer just about quote unquote ringing up a price, but if a cashier doesn't realize that, there can be problems. So a few months ago, I was talking to the chief digital officer of a food services company, and she was telling me about the data that they saw when they started digging into the data generated at one of their food sites. And what they saw was over time, they started seeing a spike in the purchase of breakfast sausage. So this was a cafeteria that served breakfast in the morning. Breakfast sausage sales started to rise to a point where there was nothing else being sold, no croissants. And this was in France. I live in France. And that is a pretty curious finding. But was it? Turns out that their new point of sales devices are equipped with these pre-programmed devices, and the button of choice was breakfast sausage. So that was the button that was closest to total. So rather than hunting for the other buttons to reflect what they had actually purchased, the coffee and the muffin, the cashiers, in the interest of moving people through the line quickly, were just pressing breakfast sausage. Well, obviously, that can be a problem if down the line management takes that data and tries to repurchase stock. If they're using it as inventory management, which the idea is to do that, they're not going to have high quality or accurate data, because this person didn't necessarily realize that they were working with data. And obviously we know that data collection is critical. So we know that it's important for data collection to be, that process by which data is gathered and measured. It's important that be done accurately and correctly, or else we're going to have problems down the line when we try to use that data. We don't want the data to be inaccurate. Data protection is also critical. It's important that employees know and understand not only that they have a role in collecting the data, but that they have a role and a responsibility in protecting that data as well. In fact, 1/4 of data incidents are actually internal to organizations, and almost half of those are inadvertent. So recently, the picture here is H&M. They reported an embarrassing incident of data misuse internal to the company. And obviously incidents like that are not good for the company's reputation or their revenues. So it's important not only for employees to know that they have a role in collection, but also in protection as well. And another important aspect is that they understand how data is being used within the organization. Data use is obviously important. I love this quote here. Sherlock Holmes says, data, 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 I can't make bricks without clay. And we also know that the future of work is going to be even more data driven. So if we think that our roles, our jobs include data today, Forrester anticipates that 80% of jobs will be transformed by automation, AI, and other intelligent machines. We're going to have to be interacting with robots and bots, automation, and understand how they think, and hint, they use data. So this is just another example of a role that wasn't previously thought of as a role that was based on data. This is someone who does cleaning in the Cincinnati airport, and in the past, these airport cleaning employees would go around on a regularly scheduled basis to the bathrooms and clean them. And if they had gotten dirty ahead of time, before that schedule, then they had just stayed dirty until that regularly scheduled time. Well, now they're armed literally with smartwatches, and they get alerts based on the frequency of people through those bathrooms, or of real-time customer feedback from some of those smiley faces that you see in the airport. So they'll get an alert and a data point that says how many people have come through the bathroom and when it will next be need to be cleaned. So just an example of how some of these roles that in the past might not necessarily have been data driven are becoming increasingly data driven today. So the good news is, fortunately, companies know that they need their data to navigate these these uncertain times. They need to be insights driven. 85% of our survey respondents tell us that they want to improve their use of data insights in their decision making. They know that they need to know to better understand their customers in order to serve them better. They need to understand or know more about their operations in order to improve them. Unfortunately, that's easier said than done. It's like losing weight. 91% report that improving the use of data insights in decision making is challenging. They have a really hard time doing that. So we're going to have a quick poll here. How about you? Are you insights driven in your organization? What % of decisions in your organization is based on quantitative information as opposed to gut, experience, or opinion? And this is something that we ask in our surveys regularly. We've been asking this every year for quite a while now. So here you'll see the poll on this on the screen. Is it 10% or fewer, 10 to 25%, 25 to 50, 50 to 75, or 75 or more? And I can see people are voting in real time. This is great. Oh, actually, interestingly, we're seeing a lot more of you are insights driven than average. So congratulations, everyone. I'm going to go ahead and stop that poll. So if you haven't pressed submit, go ahead and do it. Thank you. So, so about 50% of you say 50 to 75% of decisions are made based on quantitative information. 23% say it's 25 to 50. 13% say it's 75% or more. Hats off to you guys. That's a lot more than the average. And about 3% say that it's fewer than 10%. So I'll share those with you. Hopefully you can see that. Okay, and then let's move on. I alluded to this. So on average, fewer than half of decisions are made based on quantitative information and analysis versus gut, experience, or opinion. It's actually 48.3% this year, but in 2017, it was 45.2%. We've seen a slight increase, but not really a lot over the last few years. So why no change? In part because the organizations themselves haven't changed. When we look at practices across organizations, and based on our model of an insights-driven organization, fewer than 10% of firms have advanced insights-driven practices. And to be insights-driven, which we define as elevating insights and data to create competitive advantage, to create differentiation that becomes your competitive advantage, that requires the support of 4 pillars: people, process, data, and technology. And what we find is organizations tend to focus more on the technology and the data and not enough on the people and processes, which are critical to driving the organization forward in terms of becoming insights driven. So to be insights driven, it's really important to start with the people. Now, this looks, kind of depressing here, but we've actually discovered that many people don't feel like they have the competencies and the confidence to be data driven. We saw earlier that people didn't recognize data. Others in this survey that we did, when they were asked if they are comfortable working with data, they said that they don't necessarily feel very good about it. So for example, one person told us, there's a lot of confidence in the use of data and analysis in my place of employment, but my challenge is that I lack the skills necessary for performance in our company. Now, that really doesn't sound like a very positive, employee experience. Doesn't sound like a positive work environment if that's the way they feel about themselves. Now, then there are others who do work with data, but they worry about the errors of others. Now, take a look at a couple of these. I work as an administrator for financial advisors. Basically, data changes, things happen. They don't tell us, or my colleagues don't update anything. So again, they're blaming it on their colleagues. Here's another one we can all imagine. This person: I'm a wizard with spreadsheets and simulators. Data speaks to me. But getting correct and useful data can be an obstacle. The data must be reliable, and again, note, unbiased by the collectors. So these people worry about the errors of others. And then, of course, there are others who do use data, but probably need a refresher course in how to interpret those reports and dashboards. They often fall into common traps. For example, one of those traps is omitting inconvenient information, which could possibly misrepresent data. So here you see a graph, a line that is said to represent 14 years of unbroken sales growth, with the 2 lines in the middle reflecting a discontinuity, some years that were left out. Obviously, the reader of this assumes that that trend remained during those years, but the real story is there was actually a dip in sales during that time, and that dip should probably be explained. Another one is manipulating scale that can exaggerate differences. So here you can see someone says, this is a significant increase in sales, but there's no vertical axis. We don't know what the axis is. In fact, when you add that, you see that it doesn't start with 0, but also the increments are so small that when we normalize them, it doesn't really look like a significant increase over time at all. Results are not that remarkable. And then, of course, there's the classic, which is that correlation does not imply causation. You see the two rates here that move in a similar pattern over time, but that doesn't mean that they're related, and it certainly does not mean that one causes another. We know that the divorce rate in Maine is not impacted by per capita consumption of margarine. So it's important to think of all of these people when you put together a data literacy framework. And at Forrester, our framework, ACEs, addresses 4 goals. It addresses awareness, the goal of increasing awareness and the ability to recognize data across the entire organization. Understanding that awareness has an impact on data collection, data protection. And then the second is comprehension. And I'll admit it's really understanding, but I wanted to see so that I can make ACEs. And that improving understanding is about helping decision makers and those expected to use data understand how to do that, understand how to make data-driven or insights-informed decisions. We ask people to do that, but we don't necessarily give them the proper tools to do it well. Next, we move up the pyramid, we've got the experts. Often data literacy programs focus on the data experts. Obviously, data experts need they need continuous training. They need to stay on the cutting edge, but they're not the only ones in the organization that need the focus of a data literacy program. But next, we also have scale. One of the ways in which we can use our experts in the organization is to have them help us share their knowledge across the organization. So data and analytics teams often serve as mentors for individuals or advisors for projects across the organization. They offer office hours or for drop-in help, or they sponsor a lunch and learn or teach courses. And so we're using those data experts to fulfill some of the other goals in the organization and build a broader data and analytics community, really driving that data literacy across the organization. Now, taking a closer look, here are some high-level questions that are addressed within each of those levels. You can see the bottom ones are around awareness, and then in terms of comprehension and the decision makers, how do they make those decisions? Often when we present someone with data insights, we don't necessarily tell them where the data comes from, what the underlying logic of an analytic model is, and if we want them to trust the data and the insights that we're giving to them, we need to make sure that they understand what's underlying. And then, of course, some of the basic questions for the experts, and then how they can help others to help themselves. These are certainly not exhaustive, but it gives you an idea of the kinds of things that should be addressed across a broad, comprehensive data literacy program. So again, we're going to try to launch a quick poll here. How about you? Do you have a data literacy program within your organization? And you can tell us if you have interest in launching a data literacy program, but no plans, whether you have plans to launch a data literacy program in the works, whether you've launched one relatively recently, whether you plan to expand your data literacy program with more content and more roles within the organization. Of course, there's always an option to say that you're not interested, but presumably if you're here at this webinar, you are somewhat interested in data literacy. So go ahead and answer the question, press submit if that's required, and I'll share some of the results with you. So about 21% say you have plans to expand your data literacy program. That's great. Just went up, it's 24%. Quite a few of you, though, are interested in launching, but don't necessarily yet have plans. So I'm glad you're here today, because hopefully you'll learn a little bit about what those plans should include. I'm going to end the poll and share the results. Just not sure if that's shared. There we go. Okay. 48% said that they were interested but have no current plans. 28% said they have a program and are expanding. Only 4% said they were not interested. Surprised that 4 of you did, or 4%, sorry. Okay, so at a high level, here are some of the things that you need to really ensure an employee-friendly, insights-driven culture. You must evangelize the benefits of data-informed transformation. And by doing that, it's really demonstrating that business value, helping people understand why it's important to do this. Embedding data and analytics practices and their insights into your ongoing operations. Often that means automating them so that to ensure that those insights are turned into actions and deliver the outcomes that you're hoping for. You need to enable that effective use of data and analytics really by building a data insights community, leveraging your experts to expand data literacy across the whole organization. And then empowering decision makers by making insights-driven decisions easier with training specifically on data and analytics and that process of making those insights-driven decisions. That seems like a tall order, but actually there's some good news. There are service providers out there who can help. So we call them insight services providers, and insight services providers deliver really an end-to-end capability. They help from business problem to business outcome and solving and finding solutions for those business problems with data and analytics, delivering those insights either to the stakeholders who are making the decisions or embedding them directly into the processes. And we know that 53% of global decision makers tell us that they are engaging this kind of external services or strategic business consultant specifically for data and analytics, or as we call it, insight services. Now, I kind of went through some of this, but how can they help? Well, one of the things that we have done in our surveys is we asked people how they benefit from these types of engagements. So the number one answers was the providers help us complete the work faster. It's probably not surprising. They also tell us we want to take advantage of the third party's content and data set. We know that 56% of companies tell us that they are expanding their ability to leverage third-party data, to leverage external data. And insight services providers often come with a lot of data that they can bring to bear. But more importantly, I think we need an outside perspective to think about applications in new ways, new innovative ways, new business models, new organizational models, new processes and technologies. The providers themselves are more effective at organizing and coordinating the business and technology stakeholders in the firm. This is often something that's really difficult to do when we're trying to become more insights driven. Inertia sets in, and having this authoritative external advocate for becoming insights driven is really key to that stakeholder management. And then we can use the insight services providers established best practices to drive our own practice forward. So these are the benefits that the respondents in our surveys tell us of the benefits that they've received from using an insight services provider. So in terms of data literacy, here are some quick steps to getting started. Establish a baseline, figure out where you are in terms of assessing the data literacy of the organization, segment the workforce, tailor programs to specific business contexts, formalize that program and offer incentives, and get help with the program and curriculum development. Insight services providers are often able to help build that insights capacity within your organization, and certainly able to help with that stakeholder management and driving change. So with that, I'm going to say thank you. Turn it back over to David.
Thank you, Jennifer. So we have several questions that have come in. I'm going to ask that we hold off on those for a moment. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen and share a few thoughts about how we're applying some of what Jennifer shared at Course 5 Intelligence. So let's, which screen do you see, Jennifer?
I see your full screen.
Full screen, awesome. So
you got it right.
I got lucky.
Yeah.
Aaron Sorkin is a screenwriter, and he has a master class. He's featured on the Masterclass Company's content library, and I was recently watching his masterclass writings. If you've watched The West Wing, Social Network, A Few Good Men, a number of other films and TV shows, you're familiar with his work. He's known for his his snappy, quick dialogue, for his ability to make you feel connected to his characters. He said something really interesting in the introductory video of his masterclass video. He said, "What I need for a good story is an intention and an obstacle. Somebody wants something. Somebody's standing in their way of getting it. They want the money, they want the girl, they want to get to Philadelphia. It doesn't matter. They've got to really want it bad. And whatever is standing in their way has got to be formidable. That's what makes for a great story." Well, I really like that. And I think it applies to what we do in the data and analytics space. If intention and a formidable obstacle is what we need for a great screenplay, then we've got a potential blockbuster in all of our practices. I really liked what Jennifer shared, and I think it applies to this concept around so many people have this grand intention to use data insights in their decision making, but even more find that to be incredibly challenging. And I found that to be the case in my experience as a practitioner as well. I think it's interesting that what the result is, it's sort of because of that obstacle, fewer than half of decisions are being made by quantitative information. We end up falling back on our gut. And actually looking at that slide, I'm a little concerned about the guy jumping into the water there. I think from this vantage point, it looks like he might land on some rocks, but hopefully that's not the case. Well, if fewer than 10% of firms have advanced insights-driven practices, that means that 90% don't, and that's a fertile opportunity. That means that many, that's kind of the opportunity. That's where we're going. And so I've been thinking a bit about why this is. Why do we have this obstacle despite our intentions? Why do we keep having to fall back on intuition? Well, it's hard. It's challenging. And that means that the things that have to get done today get done today. That's what we call often the tyranny of the urgent, that we prioritize the operational tasks. And what happens in that scenario, if you do that day over day over day, that becomes part of the culture. And as we know, that, as Peter Drucker said, culture eats strategy for breakfast. And I'm sharing here my favorite breakfast bacon egg sandwich from Siddell's in New York City. Once social distancing is open, go check it out. It's the most amazing sandwich for breakfast I've ever had. So do you have sufficient intention to overcome your data literacy obstacles? Are you going to be the hero of the story, or are you going to be the GOAT? Well, we think you're going to be the hero. And here's an example of a hero. Rakuten Rewards, formerly known as Ebates. They shared this with us at our recent virtual conference that we held on May 14th. James Oliver, who works in this data enablement space, shared a statement from his CEO, Amit Patel. He said, "I was tired of hearing we need more BI people and data analysts to help us make the right decision. Many parts of our business and critical decision points were slowed down due to this belief that it required a BI person to get the data, to manipulate it, and then make it available." He had this intention to increase data literacy throughout his organization. The obstacle was he had this inertia, centralized expertise, not as much, I guess, not dispersed throughout his organization, all of the expertise, the willingness even to go become more data literate, more self-service oriented. So what did they do? Here's how the hero journey unfolded. They had this CEO vision that they built upon, and they made some organizational changes. They stopped using the BI team to solve all of the problems. They provided training, including in SQL and Tableau and a variety of other tools. They provided office hours. Jennifer mentioned several of these. This is a great application of what she described. They had newsletters, they had speaker series, they created contests for Tableau visualizations, for example. They collected feedback and created fun videos to keep people excited about the journey. And made that part of their continuous improvement story. And overall, it was a fun and persistent effort. The result being that in the course of 5 months, they've seen some tremendous progress that will only continue going forward. There's another story I want to share, but it requires me giving a bit of a background about an offering that we have at Course 5, Discovery, which we think of as a personal analyst on demand. We created Discovery to help analytics practitioners, marketers, supply chain professionals who have the intention to take action on their data, but face the obstacles of disparate data, an overabundance of systems, maybe not knowing what data to pay attention to. And we included in that tool features like anomaly detection and root cause analysis and early warning systems really focusing on how do we join people and the tool together, and not just individuals using the tool, but across business functions. We wanted to embed the functionality into the existing infrastructure wherever possible. So we're scaling on the client's cloud infrastructure. We're leveraging existing human capital. We're augmenting incumbent BI tools, not replacing them. So with that as background, with discovery, that's kind of the tool side of things. What happened on the people and the process side? Well, we recently introduced this to one of our clients in the CPG space. We started with the technology and implemented it, got all the data wired in. And after this initial establishment, we sat down with our key stakeholder and started to talk about the results. And the client immediately noticed some oddities. They noticed that there were a bunch of orders that were going unfilled that Discovery had called out it was kind of non-intuitive as to why. So the client who was in this meeting, this wasn't an operational review, it was more of a technology review. They called their colleague and said, "This is funny, let's look into this." And turned out the data was correct and they needed to prioritize a fix. And now they're meeting on a regular basis to review data and take action. And what I really liked about this is that the data brought people together so that they could act on what was happening. This is the people and process aspect of for me, the data literacy opportunity that Jennifer discussed. Intentions are not enough to power through the obstacles of our reaching data nirvana. We have to rewire your data practice. And in many cases, that means rewiring yourself, like a successful health initiative, which may require consistent, lasting change in both exercise and diet. That's really hard. We have the intention to get there. This rewiring will be more successful if it includes constant reminders and external accountability. And this is one of the reasons why I love using agile methods, especially the daily Scrum, where people get together on a regular basis for quick discussions. Agile doesn't necessarily apply only to technology development. It also applies to data and analysis, and is a great way to implement literacy broadly. We've also established an assessment practice that we call Phase Zero to improve data foundations and align on definitions and business objectives. And since we're so focused on foundations, we call it Phase Zero, the very beginning approach. And this is where we have many governance conversations and make sure that we're setting goals correctly, measuring progress toward those goals, taking action to make corrective decisions to accomplish the goal that we want to accomplish. So in summary, as Jennifer shared, building successful data-driven culture requires a focus on more than technology and data. It only works if you consider changes and enhancements to both people and process. And as Aaron Sorkin might advise, a compelling story requires both intention and obstacle. The obstacles are abundant in our lives as we work with data. The task for us is to not go necessarily searching for them because they're so close, I'm sure, but to make sure that you're relying on you're examining your intent to overcome the obstacle. And we're here to help. And I really liked the way Jennifer called out the way insight service providers can help shore up intention, whether it's by completing work faster or taking advantage of third-party content data sets, or providing an outside perspective, or organizing, coordinating stakeholders, sharing best practices from across industries. This is our bread and butter. This is what we do. And in the course of all of this, we believe that we can be heroes in our own data stories, and Course 5 is eager to assist in that regard. So let's move into the Q&A section here. A question about the framework. Jennifer, you mentioned the ACEs framework,
Right.
And how does one go about getting started with that? How does one is there a questionnaire associated with that? If someone, they see the slide and ACES and that makes sense, is there any advice that you might give to someone taking that and implementing it in their own practice?
Absolutely. So we've got a list of competencies that we associated with each of those levels. And there are questions that you can ask. You can ask different, employees across the organization, and really those questions are about some of the things that we talked about recognizing data and using data and understanding the value of data, but also things like, do you feel, are you able to present the data? Do you feel that you're your colleagues present data well? Do you trust the data that's delivered to you? So questions around at each level. And so that creates a baseline and helps you understand where you should fall on, and where you should focus your attention. So yes, doing that baseline gives you an idea of your strengths, your weaknesses, and how to approach development of the curriculum for the program. Obviously, I think that the levels of maturity and the needs can also vary by roles. So you might, content to address someone who needs to understand, have a better awareness within marketing or sales might be different than the way you'd present it to somebody in another part of the organization. So it needs to be both maturity based as well as role based to really resonate. We find that people who are faced with, presented with examples and data that doesn't necessarily reflect their own context, it doesn't resonate as well. So really look to assess the competencies within the organization, but then start to develop curricula around that based on that maturity level, but also based on context and role as well.
So that establishment of a baseline is critical, and you've spent some time creating a way to assess that.
Right.
So another question, this came to mind as you were sharing that graph of the steady growth with the seemingly uninterrupted period and then the V in the middle. Sometimes people are uncomfortable sharing data that's unflattering. Do you have any advice or tips or encouragement for people in that scenario? How does one get comfortable sharing unflattering data?
So it's better to share unflattering data and be able to explain it than after the fact have it discovered and have to correct it. So from a reputational perspective, I mean, we all, their businesses have ups and downs. Presumably, the anomalies in the data can be explained and perhaps can be explained in some way. So having that explanation and coming out in front of it is better than having to retract or change the story after the fact.
Well, that makes sense. Think longer term. What's your true purpose here?
Exactly.
Catch up with you. So one last question here. If someone's just getting started, and they're wondering, they want to make a difference. Would you advise someone to sort of pick a small area to sort of cut their teeth and get some experience, or should they look for big problems to solve when it comes to improving a data literacy practice, to get more eyes on something, or let me get started first? Is there a preference there in your experience?
So we talk about balancing tactical and strategic. And one of the things that we've seen is there are pluses and minuses of both. Sometimes it's very important to, what your longer term goals are. Obviously, if you can break them up into smaller pieces, into increments, and deliver value incrementally over time, you can demonstrate that value and you get more people on board with that. But so the idea would be to have the bigger picture in mind, but to try to be able to deliver the value from the program or for whatever. It could be an insights project, but to deliver that value over time. And David talked about having a center of excellence and having sometimes people don't like the word centralized, but a coordinated organization that coordinates business insights or data and analytics efforts across the organization. Having them build out a program that delivers that incremental value and deliver a prioritization process, a prioritization framework to have it be more transparent in terms of what you're doing first. So why did you pick this project to do first? Or why did you pick this group to educate and up level from a data literacy perspective? We find that it's important to be transparent in those kinds of process decisions.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Great. Well, we've arrived at the end of our time. I want to thank you, Jennifer, so much for sharing your insights with us. And thank you to all of our attendees. Hopefully you have learned something. Hopefully you're taking some new perspectives or some some newfound intention to overcome the obstacles that are facing you in the establishment of your data literacy practice. We'll be emailing a recording of this, as I mentioned earlier, and you'll also be able to find a link on our website in about a week's time. You can always reach out to us at our website or at info@course5i.com. We look forward to hearing from you. Again, thank you, Jennifer, for being here.
Thank you. Thank you, David.
All right, signing off. Appreciate everyone for participating. Take care.